women ran that country. And these women were at the front line of preserving their family traditions, heading up those households. And I met a lot of women who would tell me stories about that time, of how they rose to the occasion. It was really just a labor of love, and love is a labor, and it should be. We should labor for the ones that we love. When you see the evils committed in the name of faiths of all kinds, when you see the repression of women particularly, I mean, why have we historically hated women and women's progress? That we want to box them, bottle them, we want to restrict them, we want to isolate them, we want to limit them.
The one and only legendary journalist, Miss Iman Rappetti. Friends, welcome back to the LeadingSelf Podcast. My name is Gugulethu Maqetuga, your host. Like we said, this podcast is about leadership, is about celebrating leaders who are making an impact. These are leaders in different spheres of life, different careers. And today we are hosting one of my favorite people, my friend, the one and only legendary journalist, Miss Iman Rappetti.
Only a close friend will say legendary, but I appreciate the sentiment, Gugu.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
We're all grown up.
We're all grown up, I'm imagining our days at tech, how little we were, but today, we are not grown up, we are matured.
Mm-hmm. I co-sign, definitely.
And you are more matured. But Iman, thank you so much for joining us on the LeadingSelf Podcast. Now, you have had are having an amazing career. You are probably in all living rooms, in the evenings, in the mornings now at home. How do you handle this fame? I'm imagining you walking down, the supermarket, and families are gathering around you. Kids are like, "Oh, Auntie Man," how do you handle it?
I'm just giggling because, when you think of like fame, you don't think of yourself as famous or special in any way.
Exactly.
But it does happen, and it's so cool, I think, when people recognize you in a nice way. Like, they're not trying to throw rotten eggs at you. And I think my time on radio had a lot to do with that as well. People feeling very close and familiar to me, which I enjoy.
And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah. So it does happen, and the kids always, they roll their eyes, but they know the drill and they offer to take the pictures.
Wow. You've had a sterling career. I mean, you've had many ups, less downs. But tell us about the early days growing up in Durban. Iman, I don't want to go to another name that I know you.
We can.
Yeah, Vanessa Rappetti in the old days. How was it like growing up in Durban, in Phoenix?
Oh man, Durban is just an incredible place. Mm-hmm. It's we use the term melting pot of cultures and people and languages. I mean, Maskandi is always in the air, right? It's always in the auditory atmosphere. Exactly. And that was so beautiful. Or in our community in Phoenix, just all kinds of music from people's radio sets. Yeah. In our house, Radio Lotus was a favorite with my dad. So we'd listen to a lot of like vernacular music.
Yeah.
And because it was a lower income to middle income community, you met all sorts of people who were on grants, people who were quite affluent and did their houses to the nines. I mean, my brother still keeps our family home in Phoenix, and it's got a swimming pool. It's a double story now. It's completely decked out.
Different space.
Different space to what it was. But it also just exemplified the spirit of the working class in Phoenix. Yeah. They were always upwardly mobile, always trying to think of how to make the sacrifice so their kids could have an education, could have a job, and then improve their lives. Brilliant place to grow up in.
You write about that in your book, Becoming Iman, which was quite an exhilarating trip reading it, quite an amazing life. I mean, you as a child as well, quite inquisitive, quite loud,
yeah,
quite there, presence at a very young age.
I'd like to think that I've held on to that essence a little bit in my older age, Googs. And I know we'll talk later about our life at Tech, but I feel like someone else is looking out from my eyes, another energy, another spirit that is transcendental.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what's happening in my life. It doesn't matter sometimes how bad things can get. And that things have gotten bad in different places. There's just this excitement and joy to continue to live and to think, what can we do next?
Wow.
What can we do about this? And those energies were very much also part of my growing up.
It's that fighting spirit, from Phoenix, you had to be street smart.
You had to be. I think you had to be, because there were people who were on drugs in our community. There were, all sorts of different people. So as a young girl growing up in that environment, you had to know who your friends were. You had to know who your backstops were. You had to be courageous in some ways, to grow up in a community as diverse as that.
In your book, you write more about your mom and dad and the impact that they had. I mean, their story as well. We were talking earlier about sometimes how we become more understanding as we grow older, in terms of what our parents went through. Tell us more about your mom and dad and the values that you learned from them growing up.
Yeah, you touch on a raw nerve, because it's just recent that my mom passed and I haven't begun to grieve her.
Condolences.
I try not to think about her too much. And thanks for that, Googs. But my mother was an incredible, incredible woman who... She modeled for me what it is like to be resilient. I hate the term resilient because it means that you have to endure and thrive through any adversity. And that shouldn't be normal. That, like, you can't live in a high state, in a high frequency all the time. It's unhealthy because it creates stress and so on. Yeah. But my mom always knew how to make a plan. In the pot, she always knew what to put there, even if we didn't have groceries.
Exactly.
And I leaned into that. And in her older age, she was a siren. She still wore her red lipstick. She still was in the kitchen. Wow. And to the end, just wanted to go home and be herself again. Yeah. My father grew up blue collar, truck driver, taught us the value of hard work, of putting in the hard yards. It was my job too, when he would come home, and not even my job, I'd volunteer to take off his boots and wash his feet with soapy water and see the indents of the work boots in his foot and know how hard he had worked for us every single day. So between the two of them, I mean, we had a beautiful growing up. It was tumultuous in parts, as I've written. Yeah. But man, I love those two individuals, and they have affected my life even now as an adult.
Wow. And sometimes when you think back and you see those struggles that they've had. I mean, as kids, we didn't understand, we were entitled, mom and dad had to work, they had to bring, and then we would be who we were and demand. I know you as a kid, and I read in the book that you were loud. You were like, I'll get what I want. I mean, how was your relationship, especially with your dad? Because I know you were daddy's girl.
Yeah, and you read that absolutely well, Googs, and that's true. When I was born very sick, and I'd stay in hospital, and my dad would just apparently keep vigil outside the hospital. Just so concerned for my well-being. And that sparked a very early and unique bond between us. But I had him wrapped around my little finger. I could get whatever I wanted from my dad. He would make it happen. Yeah. And that was really beautiful. I wish that all young girls and young women could have that sort of experience in their first male figure in their lives, being their fathers, to shape their understanding of masculinity. As I say, not without its complexities, but he was a man I knew had my back. Wow. And that is what I think in part accounts for my high volume, is because I could say what I wanted to say. Because he created an enabling environment. I could share thoughts that were contrary to his thoughts, and he would listen to me and provide wisdom. I could share my dreams with him, and he wouldn't try and bottle them and jar them. Yeah. He allowed me to expand and contract in any way that I wanted to. And so that was really incredible.
And I think it's a big lesson for young fathers as well, who are raising young girls, in terms of how they create that space for them to be,
I think you've done that. and this is going to be slightly unusual, I think, for your audience, because we know each other so long, so I can turn the microphone on you as well. And ask how you did that for your girl. Because, as I see her today, somebody who seems incredibly empowered and self-confident.
I think I was more scared of her than... And she's sitting over there listening to us. I'm more scared of her than anything. But I think it's also about the love that you share. You know, we just got to dig deep, especially, you know, when life throws its stuff on you. You know, adulting becomes a very difficult thing, but you don't have to forget sometimes to just spread the love and love the kids. You
talked about adulting. Remember, before we came in here, we were saying that even though we're a certain age, which shall not be mentioned, we still feel like children.
We do.
And it's a lesson to young people that you never... we looked at our parents as if they knew everything.
Exactly.
And they had all the answers. Exactly. But we're their age now.
Yeah.
And we realize we don't have all the answers. We're still learning.
We don't. We learn every day. We go through stuff every day. And we make it as we go.
We make it up as we go.
We make it up as we go. You and I met at ML Sultan Technicon. We were the first group of journalism students. I mean, we used to joke that we were the guinea pigs of the department at the time. What did that time mean to you? Because I know Vanessa at that time was like this wild person.
It was cigarettes and pool and friends and conversations and a coming of age in many ways. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't sort of sexually experimental at that time. I mean, we did a couple of things, but I always saved myself for the Lord.
For the Lord.
The spectre of Jesus was always there. So that part was always very sealed off. But it was meeting young people like yourself. Remember, we came from the compartmentalization of apartheid in a way where we didn't immerse ourselves with other race groups.
Exactly.
So being at Tech finally meant we could really properly interact across...
And have friends across
races, you know? Yeah. And really get into each other's cultures and get to know each other and form these lifelong bonds, such as the ones that you and I have formed, and everyone in our class who still keep in touch till this day have formed.
And I recall, you know, you paint the picture of that period where we were all coming out of our own communities into this melting pot. That was ML at the time. And I remember one of our classmates, she's going to kill me by mentioning her name, Milasa had a baby at that time. And we all went to Guamashu. You know, even some of our classmates who had never been, I mean, they live in the neighborhood, but they had never been to Guamashu to go and look at this little girl who was born. It was such an amazing and interesting dinner. Yeah.
I wasn't there for that particular trip, but the idea of all of us having these conversations from places that we lived, where we weren't allowed to interact with each other, was such an instruction. It was and it was a coming of age in many ways. But also we were also kids and teenagers.
So true.
We were finding ourselves. Is this really what we wanted?
So true.
And that was, it was a beautiful thing.
You grew up in a Christian home.
Hey.
Let's go there. You grew up in a Christian home. It was like prayer church every day, prayer all the time. I love the way how you write about it in the book, how you would kneel, around the bed, and it was quite an amazing period. But the later you convert to Islam and you become Iman. Tell us about that transition. What was happening during that time?
It was so complex. That's why I had to write a book. And still not everything is in there. But, I was a fervent Christian. I believed in God. I believed in the Trinity and Jesus, his impact. Mm-hmm. We prayed by the bedside with my father and my mother. We went to church. I was in the youth group. I was very much plugged in. I wasn't a passive observer in Christianity. Mm. And I knew it wasn't going to be like that in Islam. And I became an Orthodox Muslim, so to speak. For me, it was about what reached me cerebrally, and intellectually, but also philosophically and emotionally. I mean, to this day, I still listen to the Qiraat, which is the recitation of the Quran, because there's something in that still connects to my soul. I still listen to gospel music. I love it with all my being, and I sing along. Fred Hammond. Yes, I want to high five you, because exactly Fred Hammond. Yeah. Lionel Harris, one of the OGs as well.
Oh, yeah.
A number of different artists.
Yeah.
I think it's because my spirit the aperture of my spirit has always been open to what makes sense to me on all of these levels at any given time in my life. And I loved being Muslim. I loved the rigor of Islam. I loved the waking up and praying. And I didn't only do what was needed and what was mandatory. I did the things that were recommended, the recommended prayers. I would pray constantly as a Muslim, wake up in the middle of the night to pray. And from that perspective, the hygiene of the religion, I really enjoyed. The practical laws, not so much, and we'll maybe get to that later around hijab and marriage and a woman's rights in Islam, which I think eventually caused me to move in a different direction.
Yeah. But I mean, even talking about that, for me, it is the fervor. It is the fire in your belly. I mean, I read in your book how much, even when you were in the Christian faith, you were like, when you went into Islam, you were like also, deep in there. Does that describe a personality type there about who you are, Iman? You are passionate. You are passion personified.
Thank you. I'll take that. It sounds like a bumper sticker. I think it's more a character thing because I think that character is what roots you into the ground. So it doesn't change as much as what's happening above the surface in personality, where, you could be this way one day and that the next. That idea of being self-convicted is very much a theme that has been with me from childhood up until this day.
Wow. To be convicted and I my history with religion. I was a pastor. I'm Fundista. I pastored a church, started a church from zero.
You took offerings from people.
In fact, one of the reasons I left was that. I just couldn't reconcile taking money from pensioners and I said, you know what, my parents took me to school. I studied journalism. Let me go back to work. That for me was the turning point.
I couldn't believe it, by the way.
I know. But it was the fervor, it was the zeal that all of us had. But, for me, Iman, and when we delve into, and I want us to visit religion, but not religion for the sake of its dogma, but for the sake of its heart. When I talk a lot about Islam, or whether it's Gnosticism in Christianity, or Kabbalah in Judaism, or Buddhism, for me, it's more about the heart for people, the heart to reach out to people and to make a difference. I remember sharing a story about being in the same room with Sufis. And I always say, if I was Muslim, which probably any believer, if I'm a believer, I would be a Sufi. Because, because of the fervor, the love, the music, tell us about that part of religion for you. How was it? How was it, managing that transition, the love, the fervor?
There is a very strong, to the point you make, a sort of cultural aspect to religion that is, that can transcend. When you talk about the Sufis, the one thing that struck me about them was, even in their worship, the reason they move in the way that they do was to resemble, it's almost like a tree shaking in the wind, and they would emulate that behavior from the Prophet, peace be upon him. So that's what's so beautiful, and they engage in dhikr, which is a praise and a worship of God constantly. Yeah. Now, if you think of when the Holy Spirit catches you and when you are lost in this other world and you speak in a different tongue, I can connect it almost to that without trying to offend anyone or anyone's religious sensibilities. But that's how it felt to me, that these are echoes of the same desires that human beings have to connect with their idea of a higher power. Whether it is in a different language, in a different country, in a different ritualistic rigor, what is central and what is consonant is the connection with the higher power, with the divine.
You then move to Iran.
Yeah, well, yes.
You pack your bags, you pack everything, you take your family.
Pack nothing, because we hardly had any.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Just the shoes and
you packed your husband.
Yeah. All the time.
And you moved to Iran. What was the motivation?
Iran was such an incredible adventure. So we gave up everything that we had, all of our possessions, small bag. I was married at that time. I wanted to know more about the faith itself, and I thought that being immersed is probably the best education, probably the best classroom. And then around that time, I was reading about the revolution of 79 in Iran, and I hadn't encountered a religious revolution like that was so interesting and intriguing.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting. I was on the Felicia Mavuza Subtle show. Can you imagine Mum Felicia defending Islam as a new Muslim back then?
Wow.
Don't go listen to the replay, because I look back now and I'm like, Iman, what are you saying? But I believed a lot. I believed what I said at the time. I was convicted about what I said. I happened to phone the local Shia center, and the imam there happened to have seen the program, and he was like, are you her? And I'm like, yes, I'm her. And he's like, I've got to meet you guys.
Wow.
A few days later, on a Jummah, he had tapes in his one arm, a Persian rug in the other, and an invitation to Iran. And that's how that all happened.
Wow.
And then we jetted off, landed at Mehrabad Airport in Tehran, and we were students of Islam.
And you settled in a town, I don't know how to pronounce Qom, because I was going to say Qom.
Yeah.
And give it a closer. So it's Qom.
It's not too far off, because the qaf is a qa. So Qom. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a Q. Yeah.
And you are students there, your first child comes, different experience.
Horrific, yeah.
And when I read in the book about what potentially you were going through, it was a tough period for you. It was not an easy time.
It was tough because I was saying goodbye to everything that I knew. Language, family, culture, into this new faith in a different land that I, was reading about. Having a baby, becoming a mother, not knowing what the heck to do. Giving birth in a military hospital, Shahid Beheshti Hospital in Qom. The only line I'd learned was, I'm going to die. And I meant it. And the nurses laughed at me.
And that was in Farsi.
And that was in Farsi.
Okay.
Man mi miram. I'm dying. And they're just laughing at me. But it also brought the community around me. It was a very cool Arab community. Another teacher who was Arab speaking. I tried to learn Arabic as well while I was there. I do speak Persian. And the Iranians. So I was just completely ensconced by these beautiful women in the community who taught me how to be a mom.
Wow. That was beautiful. I mean, what would you say? And when I read your book, it's the best sort of period of intensity for you, I could say, was that time. I mean, you could correct me there. But what were the lessons that you learned more about yourself during that time?
I mean, I learned that I could adapt really quickly to both motherhood, to an alien, which was to me an alien environment then, into a faith that I was getting to know, that I could have a sense of wonder. What could happen? I didn't have a 5-year plan. I didn't have a 10-year plan. I just knew that I was getting married, and I got married. I proposed to my husband at the time.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story for another day on how that happened. That I could decide to do something and do it. And that was a very empowering thing. A lot of times you have human beings who will imagine. We live in the balcony of our imaginings, purveying the world and looking at the horizon which we never meet because we stay stuck and rooted in the expectations of a time or of a community or a family. That I wasn't fettered. My feet had wings and I could move, and I did.
Yeah.
And that was beautiful for me because I come back to that persona still at my older age. Okay. And I feel exactly the same. I feel like I still crackle with the energy of possibility. Like, what else could happen next?
Wow. And in fact, being in a different country, different people, there's much more I can imagine that you are learning about the environment, about the people. You loved the food, and you and I talk about food most of the curry.
We have a podcast.
We need a podcast about food. Tell me more about the food in Iran. How
Sholezad, the most delicious dessert, sweet, made with rice and saffron. Horma sabzi, made with lamb and vegetables and beans and rice and zareshk and pistachios. Oh my gosh, I can go on.
Yeah.
It was a heady time. Kids forget the time before the internet. I mean, I know it makes it sound super old, but the internet was only just happening around those years. Cell phones were only just being created. So we didn't have the kind of rapid nanosecond connectivity to someone in some remote part of the world. Yeah. You can go see what an Afghani village is up to right now and see what they're doing. We couldn't in those days. You had to go there. So the preconceptions about Iran as being this backward, sort of closed, repressive and regressive state in the late 1997s was something I was learning for myself. Okay. There'd been a war in that country for 8 years between Iran and Iraq, which decimated, the frontline states bordering Iraq, which took away many sons from the women, which sent their men to war. And these women ran that country. And these women were at the front line of preserving their family traditions, heading up those households. And I met a lot of women who would tell me stories about that time, of how they rose to the occasion. Many people wouldn't have known, in those years, up in the early 2000s, thereabouts, they had the first female vice president. Women were playing. So I didn't know these things. Women were in political life. Yeah. Not only in religious life. So there were a lot of educations, or I was being educated in a lot of ways. Yeah. During that time.
And most of the time we speak from outside, looking in. And of course, I mean, the pain of the suffering people is real, and you can always comment about it. But when you've been there, when you've actually eaten, I love the way you describe how they eat on the floor. You sit down and you sometimes you have needles on your body just how you sit down.
Because we're so used to the chairs.
We're so used to the chairs.
Yeah, we're so used to the chairs. It is interesting, that culture shock, right? Of sleeping on the floor and you roll away your bedding and then you roll it back out the next day. Of how efficient some of the systems seem and how you use the space. The sense of fellowship and family when you're cooking. Cooking's a big deal. Making good food is such a big deal. Having guests over, sharing those meals was such a beautiful thing. Yeah. But going back to the question of religion, Gugu, all of these faiths and faiths that proselytize, or who evangelize and co-opt believers and so on. I think as I've gotten older, I realized that people need faith. Yeah. People need religion, even though I don't like the label atheist or agnostic, because what do they really mean? Again, they're drawing firm boundaries against something that I don't believe have firm boundaries. So give people the grace of having their Lord and having their angels and their heaven that can provide them comfort in a life that doesn't make sense often and is unjust.
And for me, having studied psychology and, after our journalism days and moving into that space, I understand the significance of holding on to something, especially when generally, hope and helplessness are general features in our societies. But when you have something that sort of carries, your engine, as it were, and you move towards it, it makes sense. It makes sense. I think for me, the toxicity that comes out of it, when you then begin to judge others who are different or having a different experience from yours, and you begin to label and judge, I think that for me, that's when the toxicity begins, the competition. It's like we're back in Saladin and the Crusaders, running to the Holy Lands and the killings that happen there. Can we not get into a point where we understand that beneath everything we are human? We are one. Can we not get there? Is it as difficult as that? Am I simplifying it too much, Iman?
I don't even know how to respond to that, because, Googs, human beings are so complex, right? And in the one breath, while I can see the virtues of religion for people to give hope and also for us to have grace to, for each other. When you see the evils committed in the name of faiths of all kinds, when you see the repression of women particularly, why does humanity Why have we historically hated women and women's progress? That we want to box them, bottle them, we want to restrict them, we want to isolate them, we want to limit them. I don't understand. And most religions have some version of this, of limiting women. We're also living in an age where you don't need to be, I think we used to be creative about our insults when we were growing up. We had to think about it because you could only insult the person that was right in front of you. They could hit you back. They could do something to you.
Exactly.
Now you can do it from the comfort of your pajamas and maybe not even wearing anything. You can say a bunch of things to a whole bunch of people. You can criticize, you can hate. And it's like an avalanche, a toxic avalanche that happens. So we're living in that sort of era.
Yeah, it's a changed era.
It's a completely change, and the word toxic is so prolific, and we become so toxic with each other. I just want things to slow down again.
I know.
And as we were discussing, to have some grace. Does it really mean so much for you to make the point?
Exactly.
For you to get to the front of the queue first? I think if we had a lot more grace, we'd be a lot more graceful as a human species right now.
You come back from Iran and you enter the South African media landscape, the broadcasting landscape. I mean, you just kill it. You just kill it. How was it? How was your transitioning back into the local media space?
Unemployed. Oh, for a year. Unemployed and pregnant. And thinking, I thought I was going to, have a job immediately. Again, not the days of, hypermedia connectivity. No. It took a long time also. I did my hard yards at the SABC. I had to do it all over again. Stuck in the bowels, doing social media stuff, the website. Then going into print at Business Day. And then Kate Katapodis, my darling, giving me a job at 702, hiring me almost on the spot. I was hired on the spot also by Stephen Lang at the SABC years before. Wow. And that set me off on a different trajectory, and I was excited again. Because this was probably 20 odd years ago.
And being an award-winning, the awards started rolling in. What would you say? I mean, you've done politics. I remember, the IEC, Elections Results Center. Yeah. When you sit in that chair and wow, I said, that's where Iman belongs. Yeah. That's where Iman belongs, but also, print, etc. Which form of journalism for you still pricks your heart, still just makes you to get going?
Now you want me to choose from my children. They all have something unique, right? So writing allows that longer form expression to string words together and to be a little more thoughtful, because you could take your time with that. The deadlines are normally a day or two. I was writing features and things like that. Yeah. But radio, there's a magic about radio that causes people to lean in. Wow. I enjoy television. I really do. And I'm still doing it still today. Thank heavens for the editors that still want to hire me. Pardon me. But radio it is definitely that theater of the mind where you can build. It's so weird because sensorially you are deprived. All you have is the tone of someone's voice. And that's what you're connecting, and you're filling in the blanks on everything else. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Love radio.
I mean, talking about radio, I think you were at Power FM for you ran one of the morning shows.
Yes.
And you introduced something I think radio was missing for a long time, which was a voice. You added something to your show, and I don't want to call it and simplify it as motivational talks, but it was more sort of a spiritual essence, fervor about who people were, who your audience were, what they were going through. But then you could go into their hearts and really encourage, motivate. Tell me about that. Where did that approach come from? Was it the experience in religion? What was it? You even wrote a book about it.
It's called Sermons of Soul.
Yes.
It's about making eye contact with a radio listener. I know that sounds weird, but I wanted a soul connection with the people because I realized, I would observe radio hosts taking calls from listeners and treat them so badly. somebody would ask, how are you? Which is so common in South Africa, right? You'd say hello and somebody would say, hi, how are you? They would just cut them off because, we're racing for time. And I'm like, somebody took their time to call me, to think about the subject and to share their view. So it was a way of respecting my audience. And then it developed from there. It's like, I know this caller from Alex or that caller from Soweto or Soshanguve or whoever. And how I'm feeling today, I feel like this message could connect to them. And so it started out because I went back to look at the very early versions that I did, and they were cursory. Okay. And then it just started to develop a life of its own. And then the more people responded saying, that touched me, I really needed that, I was like, this could be so cool. And I would literally write them in the minutes before going to air based on what I was feeling and connecting.
And they were so deep, though. It's like potentially you would have taken months reflecting.
It just came. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm so grateful because I haven't been in radio for a few years now, at least 4 or 5 years. And I still meet people who say, Iman, those sermons, those messages, they touched my heart. And I mean, what more could you want, right?
In fact, for me, even listening to you at the time, I felt that your approach to journalism was not just about hard news or even profiling the people, because I mean, with radio, you have all the time to do in-depth interviews. But for me, it was like you were also wearing not a hijab, but one of those mantles to inspire people. I mean, do you see yourself playing that? Is it something serious for you, or is it like accidental?
I think, we lose the plot when we take ourselves so seriously.
I know.
So it was really just a labor of love, and love is a labor, and it should be. We should labor for the ones that we love, not in the hard labor kind of way, but in the way that it is about works, that love is about the things that are also tangible, not just the things you can see. So that's really what it was for me. I don't take myself more seriously than that. I mean, who am I? I'm just a girl standing in front of a microphone, asking the audience to love.
Beautiful. You describe yourself in the book as a rebel, I mean, like, especially in your early days.
Yeah.
Are we seeing the rebel? Yeah, I mean, I've experienced the rebel, Iman. I have seen Vanessa.
Don't mention tequilas.
I won't mention tequilas. Yeah. But it seems that where you are right now in your life, it seems like, man, that spark is there. That spark is coming. I don't say coming back, but that spark is there.
It is there.
Yeah.
It is very there. It's always there.
Wow.
It's what has carried me through like total devastation in my life, Cooks, of losing people that I love so much. People that I love who've gone to the grave, and people that I love who are still on this planet, but I've lost them. But I'm not going to lay down and die ever.
Yeah.
I won't. I'm like, what can we do? Even when, like, for example, during COVID, when things were financially, like, really challenging, because I'd quit both my jobs. I was on this trajectory of, I'm going to start these new businesses, and things were looking good.
Yeah.
And then everything shut down. I was like, what's going to happen? And I'm like, all right, okay, let's do this. And that's always been, that's been me. And I'm still like that. I'm excited about life. I know that my great love is still out there. And we're going to make a plan. And we always have. Look at us. I mean, look at you. Your two beautiful kids are here in studio with me. They're the manifestation of beautiful, loving decisions you made in your life. You're doing something new in this podcast game. You got to teach me how to do it. Because I have a podcast in me. It's coming.
Yep. And we're waiting.
What keeps you? So, because you still have that sparkle in your eye.
No, I mean, I suppose we forever young.
Definitely.
And I always find that when you challenge yourself intellectually all the time, you push yourself, I think you begin to have a different outlook to life, as opposed to, saying you've arrived. I mean, I think we are seekers.
We're always journeying.
We're always journeying and journaling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether we write it or we podcast it, we are always journaling and finding meaning. And finding meaning, for me, it's about, and I always encourage people to, I coach, that's potentially my full-time job. I work with clients, and I always encourage them, find that essence, that spark in you. you know, I know people, there's a saying that you'll never work another day in your life, but you will work with so much smile in your face because you found that.
Because you love what you do. You love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
And if you don't love what you do, leave. Find. You know, I mean, we're not in prison.
Yeah. Look, the reality is, right, especially given what's happening in the country and the job market and so on, some people make invidious decisions. But I think what you're saying is if you keep considering, I mean, it's the same attitude that I have towards money. Money must work for me, and it's an energy that I employ. It's not the thing that directs me. I don't make decisions based on money.
Yeah.
I make decisions, and money's got to make those decisions come to life.
Yeah.
And I love that approach, Gugu, because also with our families, like we knew our working class parents, they didn't have the luxury of talking the way that we did. They had to wake up early, go to work, do the thing, get the salary, come home, spend it. It's all gone. And then they had to do it again.
Yeah.
We have the luxury of not having to do that because we can think and be more intentional about the decisions that we make that empower us in our lives.
What is your spiritual outlook these days? I mean, is it, you know, are you more
easy as opposed to intense?
The language is always love.
Wow.
And that's the simplest I can put it.
Wow. Beautiful.
It's how can I love anyone that I encounter? How do I leave them feeling loved?
Wow. Iman, thank you so much.
The time is up already.
The time is up.
I thought we wouldn't have things to talk about for an hour.
The time is up. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your heart.
Thank you for having me, my friend. And I love you so much. And I love Lynette and I love your family. So all the best to you. And thanks again to your audience as well, who's going to be listening to this.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing this moment with us. Thank you for being, you know, sharing Iman. Please get the book. It's called Becoming Iman. And also there's Sermons of the Soul. Please get the book and just love it and enjoy it. And let's get it going. Thank you so much.